Hello, everyone. I'm Dominique.
And I'm Christina, and we are the Connected in Glass podcast.
Every week, we will feature interviews with glass artists who speak to their creative processes and overcoming challenges.
These conversations are real and raw. We hope that by sharing these stories, you're able to find some connection and know that you're not alone. We just wanted to take a moment to thank you for listening to our podcast. We're super passionate about this project and work for hours every week to bring you this content. So if you'd like to help support us, please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/connectedinglass. Also, please consider joining our Facebook group, Connected in Glass Community, where we continue the conversations from these episodes. We'd love to hear from you. Today, we're interviewing George Kennard. George is a glass artist from Plattsburgh, New York, who started blowing glass in 1990. He specializes in large-scale furnace work.
Hello.
Hey, Dom. Hey, Christina. How are you?
Hi. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here.
Okay, so to start, we want to know a little bit about you. Skip the glass part of your life for now, even though that's a major part of your life. Tell us about where you live, what you enjoy besides glass, and then start working into the story on how you started doing glass.
Well, currently I have a wife and two children, two girls. My girls are 23 and 25. They're both, one is graduated, one is currently in school. My wife is a nurse and I work at the Corning Museum of Glass. And besides glass, I live near Seneca Lake. So I have a sailboat and that's one thing I really like to do.
I didn't know that about you. Cool. We're already learning new things. So tell us how you started doing glass all those many years ago.
So this is a story that I told a long time ago that a lot of people have heard through the grapevine and usually get wrong. They say, oh, I read an ad in the paper. Well, actually what happened is my older brother, he worked in the town hardware store, and this local glassmaker used to come in there all the time and kind of got to know him and liked him and asked him if he wanted to have a different job. And my brother was like, no, I'm actually in the process of getting another job, so I'm not going to be around. But my younger brother just graduated high school and he's looking for work. So I was working at a factory that was making dump truck boxes. I really didn't like it, and I wanted to do something different. And when he told me about this opportunity, he said, oh, he had a glass shop. And I took it as he had like a window shop where he was like installing windows or something to do with the commercial side of glass. And so he gave me the address, and I called Leon Applebaum up. He's the one that had the job, and he told me to come on up and have an interview. Well, unbeknownst to me, it was in a place that I drove by every day on the school bus going to school. So I was surprised when I walked in. He had a glass studio. I had no idea, and he asked me if I would be willing to give it a try. And I said, yep. And I knew within a couple of weeks that that's what I wanted to do. So I worked with him for, I think, about 5 years.
What kind of work did he do?
He made really larger, thick pieces. They were usually between 4 and 5 gathers, but they weren't blown out very much. A lot of texture on the surface. And he had a large cold working studio where all of the bowls and vases that he made were actually broken off on the blowpipe, and then they were cut on an oil saw, a big, large diameter oil saw that you crank the piece on and you close the lid and it would cut it itself. And then all those pieces would be taped and beveled and put on a reciprolap, which would grind them. And then we'd put them on another reciprolap that would polish them.
Did you like it right away? And were you just kind of like a punty boy for a really long time?
Well, we didn't punty, so I wasn't the punny boy. But what was nice about it, it was something totally new and different. And even though I grew up in the area, I didn't spend any time at the museum. I think that I went there maybe once or twice when I was really young. So I had really no idea about glass and, how much it has affected the local, towns around us. But what was nice is that I graduated high school. He had a small apartment upstairs above the glass studio, and he told me I could live there for free, but I had to look after the reciprolaps. So they were going 24 hours a day, and I'd also be responsible for charging the furnaces, which was 2 furnaces that held 300 pounds, and we would charge them both daily. So I lived up there. I could actually hear the reciprolaps downstairs going, and I had a thermocouple hooked to the furnaces so I could read what the temperature was in my apartment. So I got really good at charging glass. We had CD glass. I would go back and we would look at what we did, and by the end I could melt pretty good glass.
Wow, he had like a really big setup going on, huh?
Yeah, and the apartment was it was small, but it was great. It was like a loft area that I slept in, and had huge windows that I could see the sun rise every morning. It was really a great experience.
So then next you worked for yourself for a while?
No, I got a job down in Corning on Market Street for a gentleman named Louis Olson. He had a shop called Noslo Glass. And then I worked for him for probably, I think, 4 years also. Yeah. And then I moved just down the street to Vitrix Hot Glass. And I worked for those guys for about 5 years. Yeah.
And you're doing production for them, or were you teaching at that point?
I was doing production, all 3 of those shops. So in the morning at Leon's, we would blow glass, and in the afternoon, I would cold work, because we would empty both 300-pound furnaces in the morning. And so then it was like a half a day of cold working. Yep. And Noslo Glass and at Vitrix, it was all production all day long. Yeah.
And this whole time you're doing this, you're like, this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life? Like, were you passionate about it?
I don't know if I really thought about in terms of the rest of my life, but at no point I'd ever really thought about leaving glass. I'd always really liked really the chance to make my own stuff too. And that was one nice thing when I started at Leon's. He told me that I could work a half a day on Saturday before we charged. So I could, work as long as I wanted to Saturday, as long as I charged the furnaces by Sunday. So I got to make my own work. I got to practice a lot. And I think that's a big opportunity for a young glass person, because rental time is expensive. And actually back then there was no rental studios. Not in our area anyways.
And when did you go to Corning, and when did you meet your wife?
I met my wife in the 2nd grade. And so I've known her pretty much my whole life. We dated in high school, and I think from 10th grade on, and we got married in 1990, the year that I started making glass.
And what does she think about glass? Like, did she like living in the apartment above the glass studio?
She did like living there. We were both very young, 19 and 18. So it was the first that we were really out on our own, but we lived in the same town as our folks. And, but, that's what was great about it. It was, the job was brand new and exciting and learning something all the time. So I was pretty immersed in the glass right from the beginning. It seemed like 24 hours a day. Actually, she would get tired of listening to me talk about glass.
Is she over that now?
I'm over it. No, I still find myself maybe not talking about it, but watching a lot of YouTube videos on glass.
And then how did you get into Corning? Corning was like really kind of a baby when you got there, right? Or the studio the way it is now?
Yeah. So I was working, I believe I was working at Noslo Glass. And then when I went to work at Vitrix, Corning is a factory town. So really the only handmade glass there was the Steuben factory. And a lot of those guys were, it was like a factory job. So they worked, different shifts, and they'd probably never thought about making their own glass. But when the studio opened up, they needed somebody to teach. And really what happened was the studio was brand new, and they put out their first artist in residence. And I applied for the application. So, and I got it. So I was the first artist in residence at the studio. And then that went from there into teaching weekend classes and the 10-week long class. And that really led in, I did that for for a long time, but what that led into was Steve Gibbs and John Cowden, which was the supervisor of the hot glass show at the time, the manager. They both came and took my class, and they asked me if I would be willing to come work some weekends. So I worked a full-time job at Vitrix Monday through Friday, and then I would go do the hot glass show on Saturday and Sunday. And if I wasn't doing that, I would be teaching at the studio some classes.
Can you tell us the mindset that you go into if you're going to go in for teaching versus like how you go in if you're going to go in for a production day?
Yeah, I always looked at teaching as like, it was always a fun aspect of glassmaking because it makes you really think about what you're doing. When you're doing production, I just find myself kind of going on autopilot, and you're talking about all sorts of different things, and you're not really thinking about the glassmaking. When you're teaching, you have to think about it because you're explaining how to do it to somebody else. So a lot of times I would try to really break it down and, explain it in as simple terms as possible and try to show them without them, getting burned or frightened about the material, because the gathering is the hardest part in the beginning. When the person goes up to the furnace with the blowpipe for the first time and they can't see the level of the glass, and the furnace is so hot and their hands are so close because they have their left hand slid halfway up the pipe. And you're trying to tell them, no, slide it back to the end so you can comfortably gather. And there's just a whole list of things that, as a glassmaker, you don't think about because it was so long ago when you had to do it yourself.
And so that must have been a whole bunch when you were working like 5 days a week and then in the studio on the weekends. But you kind of have been doing that now too with helping your daughters go through college, making pumpkins, right?
Yeah. So, the plan was that I was going to open my own studio at some point and make my own glass. And I've always made my own glass, but just not on a full-time basis. So, I wanted, early on, I wanted to pay for my daughter's college. So we had moved to where I live now. I built a studio and just have a little small 80-pound furnace. And usually 4 to 5 months out of the year, I come home and blow glass in the evening. So I don't teach as many classes now because I'm 20 miles away from Corning. And I spend my time making production here at my studio. So I've made a lot of small 2-gather pieces, pumpkins, bowls, vases, things that, I can do while I watch TV.
Yes, I picture you in your backyard with a big TV making pumpkins.
That's it. That's exactly how it is. Watching Family Feud.
So can you talk a little bit about your own style of work and what you most enjoy making?
Yeah, when people ask me that, I don't really know what style of glassmaking I have. I've worked with a lot of different artists, and working in a production shop, you just kind of do it the way that they want you to do it, or you have to come up with the results that they want. So for me, it's always how to try to do it the fastest and the most efficient way that I can. So I don't know what really style. I mean, I've taken a lot of classes from Venetian glassmakers, from Swedish glassmakers. I mean, Leon Applebaum, he has a very Swedish style of glassmaking. Like everything is very thick and, lots of color application and lots of texture. And then when I went and worked for Lewis, his style was just the opposite. Everything was very thin and, very fast paced. And and Vitrix too, working for 3 different shops that have totally different styles. I don't really think that I have my own style. I just try to adapt to whatever I need to make.
But do you some mornings do you wake up and you have this brilliant idea that you want to kind of try and work through? Do you have inspiration, or do you feel like it comes and goes?
I always, it's to me, like my job has been for the last 21 years a full-time demonstrator. So like, usually the job entails, for the most part, doing a demonstration that lasts between 20 and 25 minutes. It's usually 2 gathers, and you try to show them as much as you can. So like there's a lot of range there that you can choose from. But working in the museum, I get to walk around and see so many different things. And that gives me a lot of inspiration. I've definitely made a lot of things that, not replicating what I see, but trying to put my own spin on it. I do wake up sometimes and say, yeah, I want to try this, or I want to try that. And a lot of times it comes in forms of, is a specific thing that they want us to do. Like we do a thing called You Design It, We Make It. So kids do drawings and then we interpret the drawing. So for example, yesterday, this was the last thing for the summer that we'll do, because kind of the programming changes because we get a lot more visitors. But I did a You Design It for a school group, a local school group, and they drew a bunch of animals, and we chose an animal and then put our own artistic, inspiration on it. I chose a rabbit. So I made a rabbit that's probably about 2 feet tall. And this is for the art class. So it's holding a paintbrush and a paint tray. It's got a painter's hat. And I made parts like a couple days during the week in between shows. And then I made the head and the pants, and then put all the rest of it together yesterday morning. It took about 2 hours. So those are really fun projects,
So do you feel like you always have to be on? Because it sounds like there's thousands of videos of you on the internet doing your job, and you have to meet people from all over the world, which I'm assuming is so amazing because you get to learn from them and their perspectives. But it seems like you always have to like really be on, like you have to watch what you're saying and be entertaining the audience and entertaining the people. Is that hard?
Probably in the beginning, I was more aware of that, but after you do it every day, all day long, I just feel like I'm just trying to be myself, and just go through the day doing what you do and trying to do the best job you can. I mean, for me, that's the thing. Is like, people come in and it's maybe their first time that they've ever seen glass, and maybe their hundredth time they've seen glass. Every time I want to make sure that I try to make it a compelling show, and that they walk away saying, wow, that was really cool.
And do you ever go through like slumps where you wake up and you're like, I don't want to do this anymore?
I've never really felt that way. I shouldn't say that. Usually when I go through this times where like I work all day and then I come home and I work at night, and like usually at the end of like, it gets to be month 3 or month 4 and I'm doing it 7 days a week. That's when sometimes I feel like, I feel a little burned out, And I think in the beginning too, when I was teaching classes and when I was working production, it was a little different because they're different things. You're still around the furnace, but I didn't feel that way as much as sometimes I have in the past couple of years. You're just making tons of stuff. And after a while, it's like, your 90th 12-hour day, you're like, man, I just want to go do something else, like go sailing.
Can you tell us about your adventures on the cruises too?
Yeah, that was another, great experience working at the museum. I've had a lot of great experiences, things that most people in the glass community don't experience because they're making a living doing it. And working for a museum, there's been different opportunities to do really different fun things. And the cruise ships was one. So when that program started, they started with 1 ship, and it ended up with 3 ships with a hot shop on the 15th deck. So they would have to, employ 3 different glass makers all year long out on the ship. So that's 9 glass makers full time every day, 365 days a year. I got a chance to go out 2 contracts, which were short ones. They were both 2 months long. So I got to experience that as far as like, they had us make the wine bottle and fill it with local wine here that they christened the ship with. So I was actually on the ship watching this big show that they had, and I made the bottle that actually they broke on the ship, which was one of those huge champagne bottles. That was a fun thing. But then I was out there for 2 months and we sailed all over the Baltic Sea. So I got to go to Russia, Sweden, Estonia, all over the Baltic Sea, which was great. I mean, I would have never made it to the Hermitage, which is the giant museum in St. Petersburg, Russia, if I hadn't been on the ship. The second time I was out there, I just filled in for somebody that had to call off. So it was like January 20th. It was 20 below zero here in upstate New York. And they told me I was going to the Caribbean. And like the first stop was Aruba. So that was pretty fun too.
Twist my arm.
Yeah.
What would you say are like some of your big lessons that you've learned in all of your life experiences? Seems like you've had a lot of those.
I think some of the biggest lessons, or the one that I feel like that I try to do myself, is just be nice to people, especially in the hot shop. It's really easy for like, people to get upset or angry because things go wrong, or, it's just like a split second, everything's fine. And then the next moment, oh, it's, everything's going wrong. And I think just be nice and try to stay calm. And that's a big lesson I think that I try to, take myself.
Can you tell us what your perspective is on women in the studio, and if you've seen a change in the last 30 years that you've been in this industry?
I've always taken a lot of classes at the studio and have taught a lot of classes, and I think it's 50-50. There's not too many hot shops around the area. Most of them, was men working in them. But, and even Steuben, there was one woman that worked on the Steuben factory floor. But in like, the local community, or the, like the international community, I think it's like 50-50, maybe even more women. So when you take a class at the studio, you can be guaranteed it's going to be at least half women, if not more, which I think is great.
Do you think that that's been that way since you started at Corning, or do you think that it's just been increasing?
I think that it's been increasing. I've been making glass for 31 years, and I think maybe in the beginning it wasn't as much, but with most people today learning in college, I think, it's definitely that way. And I think, I've been a part of this show called Blown Away, and, it's come down like for the last two seasons. For the first season and the second season, the first season, woman won it, Deb Zaresko, which I was on her team. She's fantastic glassmaker, and she's been doing glass for 30 years too. And the second season, it ended up being a woman and a man at the end, Kat Burns and Elliot Walker. And fantastic glassmakers. So I don't think that you can say one is better than the other. Well, I guess you can say at the end of the show.
Yeah, don't ruin it. No, I'm just kidding. So we have gotten to talk to a number of people that got to participate in Blown Away, which was really fun. But can you give us any insight on your perspective? How weird was it to be in a hot shop that's also like almost a movie set?
Yeah, no, it's different. Being up there and doing that, I mean, obviously the contestants are very stressed because it's at the end. I mean, when the six assistants show up from the museum, it's the end. So they're all stressed and, want to win. And it is different, it's a movie set. And I mean, I don't know if you could say it's a game show. It's definitely reality TV. It's different.
Do you think that they represented the artists as they were in real life, or do you think they kind of pulled clips to create characters?
I'd say a little bit of both. I'd say it's hard to not be yourself. I mean, they take so much footage, whatever way that they use it, it's still you're on the camera. So I mean, most of the time that's the person who they are, unless they're really faking it. And sometimes it's really hard to fake it in the hot shop, I'd say that's when your true personality really comes out.
Yeah, like when you're sweating and under pressure, tired and away from home.
Yeah, for like a month.
Do you like feel when you're stepping up to assist people that you're just fine? Or do you ever go like, oh no, I hope I don't F this up? Or do you feel that you feel pretty confident?
Yeah, I've never really felt like I was gonna screw it up. You know, sometimes you get nervous. You don't want to make a mistake, you know, but you know, things happen. Um, yeah, I don't. I think just because I've been around so many different artists and have assisted so many different people, and like, you know, whatever they need, I'll do whatever I can to, you know, make it go, you know, go the best. And I don't really get too nervous.
Can you tell us a little bit about the classes that you teach with Sally and any flame working experience that you have and just kind of how you came up with those ideas? Because I think it's really unique collaboration.
Yeah, so Sally Prosh is a dear friend of mine, and I've known her for a long time. Almost the whole, I shouldn't say that. I think since 1997 is when I met Sally because she worked at the studio when it first opened up. So when I was teaching classes, she was teaching classes, and you know, uh, she remembers this one time that I was making something really big in the hot shop, and I didn't have enough help, and she come out and helped me. It was like the third person, so we've always just been really good friends. And she is a really good you know, furnace worker. Besides being a flame worker, that's what she started doing, was furnace work. And I'd say that because we've been friends, she's always wanted to collaborate and do something together, but it's hard to find the time just because we both work a lot. So she came up with the idea of teaching a glass class called From the Flame to the Furnace. And so we would make parts in the hot shop, which is soft glass or soda lime glass, which a lot of people don't use in the hot or in the flame shop. And we'd incorporate it. So we'd make parts or pull cane or, you know, pull color, straight color, and take it into the flame shop. She would make things out of it, and then I would do something with it in the hot shop. A lot of it is her creative ability to really marry the two together. I have very little flame working experience, enough where I can flame work, but it's not my forte. At the museum, we have a flame working demonstration, and sometimes I do that, but it's not what I feel comfortable doing. Yeah.
Do you do the demonstration in Boro or do you use like Moretti or something?
I use Boro. Yeah. Yeah. I can make a fish, but it's been a good class too. We get a lot of people that are, you know, beginners. So you kind of have to take them from the beginning to show them how to flame work, for one, which Sally is really good at, but also then try to teach them the whole other side of it in the hot shop, which is a lot of teaching to try to get people up to speed. So yeah, I think that we've done that class maybe 5 or 6 times. And I think Sally's got another class lined up at Salem Community College next year to do it, which it's always fun. It's always just fun to go do glass and do something different.
Okay, so I was digging around on the Corning website and I saw your biggest snowmen and the world's largest pumpkin, and I want to know more about those.
Well, you know, like I said, at the museum, there's always like a project going on or something that they want us to do. So, you know, for visitation, we always want to have something that, you know, people get excited about. And the pumpkins are like a really popular thing, or they became really popular maybe 15 years ago. I don't know, at least that long ago. And so the senior manager at the Hot Glass Show, Steve Gibbs, came and asked me if I would gaff the largest pumpkin. And so they rented time at the studio. We built a mold, and we did it for like, I think it was like a week and a half. Every day we would go over and make these giant pumpkins until we had 4 that they were happy with, and they chose 2 to put in the back of a 57 Chevy pickup truck, which is kind of one of those things that they put the pumpkins in, or in the spring they put with flowers, you know, glass flowers or things like that. So yeah, it's you know, something that they do to help, I think, bring guests in. You know, they always advertise it and say, oh, well, the snowmen are up, or the pumpkin's up, or the glass feast is up. We all were involved in making a Thanksgiving themed glass feast. So Eric Meek made a glass turkey, and there's glass gravy, and there's anything you would see on a Thanksgiving table. It's pretty fun. But the snow people, that was my idea, because there's really not a whole lot going on in the winter time. So I said, hey, we should make some glass snowmen. And so we made the mom and the dad that are like 6 feet tall with their hats, and they're all put together cold. So like the bottom ball is huge, but then I made a medium ball to put on top of it and a small ball to put on top of that for the head. And if people are wondering, they can just go on the website and look at them. But that grew into like making a daughter, making a little boy, making a dog. The dog's name is Pyrex. We have a little dog dish that has Pyrex on it, and we fill it with cullet.
You can also find videos of making those online. And I remember watching one of them, you like made a really big ball and then it couldn't fit in the annealer. So I'm pretty sure you or your sister just dropped on the ground and it just smashed everywhere.
Yeah, those were fun projects. Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so if people don't know you from your voice, you're like a happy, jolly man. When you see you in person, at first, some people are scared of you, but then you smile and start talking, and clearly you're really friendly. But do you ever like suffer from depression? Like, are you always happy and jolly, or do you feel down ever, or do you find ways to get through things like that?
I think that like probably with everybody else, there's times when, you go through really sad times in your life. Like, I come from a really large family. My mom had 13 kids. And so, I've got 2 brothers that have passed away, a younger sister that have passed away. My mom passed away not too long ago, about 3 years ago. Those are really hard times to get through. And sometimes doing something you really love to do helps you get through those situations. And for me, that's a lot of times it's been making glass. Maybe it's one of those things in my studio. Sometimes when you feel that way, you don't want to be around a lot of people, or if you're around people all day long and you feel like, oh, I can't really just be myself or feel, the way that I feel. For me, being in my own shop, being by myself, working alone, and just maybe reflecting on, your life, or, things in your past, and good times and bad times. I feel like glassmaking has helped me through some of those situations.
Do you have anything that you want to leave everybody with?
Yeah, I think that it's great that, glassmaking has kind of become more popular, and I see so many people come to the museum and people interested in it. And I think it should be very inclusive. I think everybody should try it at least once. And I'm glad that I found it, and I still love it. And if anybody that listens to this, come to the museum, stop it and say hi. I'm not a mean guy.
He just looks big and scary, but he's not. Just gotta hear your funny laugh. Well, thanks so much for all your time.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me, and I will see you guys around.
Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of Connected in Glass. Make sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram for more information on the artists we interview and for updates on the podcast.